I'm not racist. I'm not biased. I treat everyone the same. How often have you heard that or thought it or even said it out loud? I know I definitely have. James Racine with Identity Diversity Solutions is joining us once again. And James, it's something that I've said it, I've thought it. I mean, I know people are posting it on Facebook, but the reality is, and I think maybe this is one of the things when you look internally during what's been going on, is that we all have a bias or
Mhm.
biases toward other people, whether or not we realize it.
Right. Absolutely. We do. Absolutely. And this occurs when stereotypes influence automatic brain processing, right? We can be susceptible to inherent bias and not even know it. And understanding that this conditioning, Angie, starts at a very young age, right? So at 3 months of age, we talked about this in prior segments, that babies start to show a preference for faces of their own race. So this does exist, and many times we don't even realize it.
It's interesting that you say that because at first, um, my own daughter, who's multiracial, really seemed to gravitate toward babies that were lighter.
Mhm.
And now, I mean, she's got a multicultural melting pot. She's
You're
got
right.
black baby dolls and, multiracial baby dolls and white
Right.
baby dolls and
Right.
Asian, all kinds. And now it's because that reflects. I mean, it's
Hmm.
very interesting because it's so innocent to watch.
Absolutely.
But
It
so,
is.
James, I mean, at some point, I'd love for us to have a longer conversation
Hmm.
on here because I have been, and I know others, because of Great Day Live viewers, I'm just so grateful to those of you who do reach out,
Hmm.
are looking at ourselves inside out right now, and it's uncomfortable sometimes because I'm okay, I'm not
Right.
part of this, and then you go, whoa. So, first question is this: how do we assess
Hmm.
our own biases? How do we look at ourselves and be able to pinpoint, hmm,
What
maybe
they are.
I
What they
do
are.
have that.
Right. Well, before you even take that step, Angie, you have to remove the stigma that we have placed of admitting a bias or even a racial bias, right? So you don't have to be an actual racist person or bad person to have bias. So you need to remove that stigma first before you even go into this next step. One step, and we love to, people, I think we're human and we like to have specific steps, something I can do, right? So, one way to assess this is by taking an implicit bias test. There's an amazing one, Harvard's Project Implicit. I don't know if you're familiar with that. They developed this test, created many years ago, that measures social attitudes and beliefs that people may be unwilling or unable to realize. So, if you just go in Google and type Harvard implicit bias test, you could take this. It's amazing. It exposes one's implicit attitudes, right? So we're talking about bias that you don't even realize that you have, of which they are unaware. For example, so you may believe that women and men should be equally associated with careers in scientific fields, yet are automatic, right? So that reflex association could show that you associate men with science more than women, right? So although you may believe certain things, your bias may show up where it's contradicting that. So taking that test is one specific test way that you can assess your own bias.
Once we are able to pinpoint some of those biases that we have, whether it has to do with race or gender, or I mean, economics, or
Hmm.
it can go in so many directions. So
Hmm.
after we assess it, and I think we need to constantly assess it, but
Hmm.
how do we address that? And I'm going to have you stick around with us,
Hmm.
James, a little bit longer to give a real world, some guidance on action, but we assess it. So the question for this right now, though, is okay, I see I have a bias. How
Right.
do I address it?
Right, absolutely. And the way we address it, Angie, is by managing it. I think many of us want this kind of a math formula. What do we do? And hey, we're cured. We're not going to have bias anymore. So you assess it by realizing that bias is not a trait, but it's a state. right? So some situations make us more vulnerable to bias than others. And the more we understand this, the more powerful we are, because then the issue becomes trying to figure it out, identifying it, and then reversing it. Does that make sense?
It does. I just, while you were up on screen, I just went, bias is not a trait, it's
Mhm.
a state.
It's absolutely a state, right? And we are so stuck on where we want everything to be a fixed identity,
Yes.
right? And so that's even when we're talking about racism. You're either racist or you're not racist, right? And so these aren't fixed identities, and you have to understand that you can train your brain to undo and manage this.
When you said state, I mean,
Uh-huh.
automatically in my head, I mean, that gives me so much hope because
Mhm.
there are certain traits that, yes, I'm sure we can argue in whether you can change and all of these kinds of things. I'm right-handed and maybe I could teach myself, but a state,
Yeah,
I can affect change. I can
absolutely.
change that. Now, James, will you stick
Right.
around with us?
Oh,
Love
of course.
the conversation. For more information about James's company, Identity Diversity Solutions, just visit identitydiversity.com, and he's going to stick around with us and we'll talk more with him coming up.